organization like reach schools on their list.
Yeah.
And I just looked it up. It's less than 3% of people play Division I college soccer on the women's side. And so, yes, it is, hard to play Division I, but also it's just really important to keep our eyes open to other opportunities that you think you don't want, but might be a really enjoyable experience and opportunity for you.
Yeah. And oftentimes I see so many kids come in with these lists of schools, and they're all D1 schools that they would not choose if soccer was not in the picture. And that is really where I find athletes go wrong, because anything can happen. You might not like the coach when you get there. You might not like the team. You might get injured. And picking a school that you love despite soccer is so important. And when you're just focused on D1 schools, you totally take that out of the picture.
Absolutely. And I think you make a great point, Jill. It's not even sometimes about division. It could even just be about like that school itself. And I think we can all be honest here. Power 4 is almost like its own separate entity. And I think a lot of people come in thinking, oh, I want to play at a Power 4 school, but I'd love to see a statistic on that too. Like, what's the reality of amount of female soccer players that play P4?
Right. I don't know. That's a good question. We'll have to ask Google at some point.
Yeah. I don't know. It might be beyond Google and AI.
That is true.
Probably not, but whatever. Okay, so these are all really great points, but let's chat about it. I'm going to start with this, and then you guys tell me your thoughts. I think, and Kira said this before we got started as well, most people think D1 because of the financial opportunity that arises there. And, Division II has that same ability to give out financial athletic scholarship, not just financial aid, need-based or academic. But the thing is like, depending on where you go, that might even not be a factor considering what you're thinking, because schools have only a certain amount that's allotted to them by their university. So just because it's a D1 school doesn't mean that they're going to have 28 full rides. Now, maybe, I'm just throwing out a random one out there, I don't know that it's factual, Clemson does. Maybe Clemson has 28 full rides, and that's amazing. But most Division I schools have a fraction. They have maybe anywhere from 3 to 28 scholarships, full scholarships that they can divvy amongst the team. So just because you're going D1 also doesn't guarantee you to get that athletic scholarship.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think it's important, and I understand that, because I'm not sure I would have been able to go to school if I didn't get a scholarship, right? And I am one of the probably very small amount of people who didn't actively pursue recruiting. Like, I just didn't send out emails. I didn't talk to coaches. I didn't call anyone. I only had 2 schools that called me on that day when everyone can call you. Only 2 schools called me, and I just chose one of them. And I really did luck out because it was an amazing opportunity for me, but I didn't actively pursue any of those things. And I think that we miss out opportunities because we get so narrowed in on, I have to go to this division or this conference or this maybe bigness of a school, or I need to do and have this experience. But I think maybe one of the biggest things that can kind of guide our decision is why. It's just asking that question, why? And is that going to be meaningful in 10 years' time? Is it going to be that meaningful in 10 years' time? Like, for me personally, I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to play. And of course, nowadays, you don't have that guarantee of schools saying you're going to play all 4 years, right? Because if someone's making you that type of guarantee, you should probably hesitate. But you want to go someone that's realistic, that you can play. Like, for me, that was really, really important. And I didn't want to be going to a school where I wasn't being valued monetarily because I couldn't afford it, right? But also for some people, it's like that is a good way for you to kind of gain insight on if they're really serious about you or not. But I think asking ourselves why, like, personally didn't want to go into, $200,000 of debt to play soccer anymore, especially at that point in my career. Professional soccer wasn't really a thing in the States. So there was no future after school. So I wanted to make sure that I enjoyed my last 3 or 4 years of playing if I could. and also not graduate with a ton of debt. So I think asking ourselves why things are important, and maybe we don't necessarily need to get an athletics. We need a scholarship, and maybe we go somewhere where we get something that's like more academic or financial aid or something like that we can also consider, which might broaden our scope of where is going to be the place I land, like a great fit for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because finances are important. Like, no one here is saying that that's not. If you can get that, where you can get academic and athletic, and you can limit how much debt you go into, like when you are done playing soccer or you're done with school, like that is so important, because no one wants to have to pay back loans. It's hard. It's not an easy route, right? Like, it doesn't matter if we're talking school, a car, or a house. Like, it's not easy to do. So I understand the value and the importance of making the right financial decision. And I think sometimes, on the contrary, people end up paying a lot more because they want to play at that Division I school who's only giving them pennies on the dollar, and they're qualifying for academic. But let's say they went to a state school, played, they would have had half of that, because of the academic package they qualified for. So I think it's to say that finances are very important, but athletic scholarship isn't the only thing to consider.
Yeah, I think that's why it's really important to have good grades, so that you broaden your range of schools that you can apply to. And that way, if a school is only giving you a small amount of athletic scholarship, you have more academic scholarship money that maybe you can fall back on.
True.
Well, I was going to ask you, Tori, is like, well, what other factors should people be considering when they're looking at schools? Because, financials is a piece, playing time is a piece, but I do think that there's way more there. Not way more, but there are other important factors that we at least want to consider, right? Maybe in the end we decide that like that maybe is like not a need. It's like I would want to go to a bigger school, but I don't need to go to a bigger school. But what are some of the other factors that I should consider when thinking about a good fit for me?
I think a big one, because no matter what division you play at, you're spending a lot of time with a certain group of people. The same way you want them to want you, you want to want them. Like, when I step on campus, do I feel welcome? Do I feel a sense of community amongst the players? Is there an open communication between coach player? Like, when you go to these ID camps, I think one of my favorite things that my boss Jess says is like, watch us, see us interact, see us talk with people. How does it feel when we talk to you? Like, you need to know if you like us, not just if we like you. So I think that one is huge, and it's something that you have to really try to take in and consider when you get the opportunity to be on campus with the team, coach, any kind of interaction.
And adding to that, a lot of times athletes have a lot of success when they take it as an interview process. You're interviewing the coach. You're making sure that coaching style is a good fit for you, that school is a good fit for you, that you like the field, that you like the practice environment. And you're taking it as an interview because this is about your process. And most college coaches want you to be wherever the best fit is for you. And if that's not their program, sometimes, they're going to be okay with that as long as you're happy, because you're not going to do well in a program you're not happy with. So taking that process as an interview process for you and being very precise on what you're actually looking for is super important.
Welcome back to another episode of Gloves Off. Today you've got the two bills for the price of one. Today we have Bill, Steffen, and Bill, I gotta say, when I was emailing you, every time I sent it, it would say email sent to Bill, and I would think, did I just send it to myself? And I have to check. Oh, okay, good. So I'm really glad to hop on a call today. For listeners that may remember last episode, Tracy name dropped you and off air talked very glowingly about working with you, and have only heard positive things about you. So I'm really excited to talk to someone that has a very kind of two-sided view of the goalkeeping. You didn't just play in the era, but obviously you transitioned into coaching long before goalkeeper coaching was a popular thing to do on Instagram. You were really way ahead of the curve on that. So Bill, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm happy. I always happy to talk about goalkeeping.
Love it. Very good. All right, well, rewind us back. We're going to try to go through chronologically here. I'm sure there'll be some ebbs and flows with all this, but goalkeeping growing up, you know, I'll give kind of my thoughts, and you correct me where I'm off base or I'm wrong, but it seems like, you know, really 20th century, 70s, 80s goalkeeping was very anecdotal of what you had in front of you, what was around you. You might see something on TV, but a huge emphasis on whether it's the neighborhood or a coach that you might have just kind of randomly had. And then I know on the East Coast, a lot of different ethnic groups that are kind of meshing and having a lot of influence. So tell me kind of about your upbringing of goalkeeping before you got to college. Of what was it like? What did you understand about the position? What did you know at all? Were there goalkeepers you liked watching? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, it was. There wasn't a lot of information available for people. So I got into goalkeeping originally. I was going to try out for my high school team. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'll run around the midfield. I don't know. And we had a senior goalkeeper who's good at it, but we just had the one senior. And he broke his finger the first day of trials. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going like, if I play goalkeeper, I'm starting. So she said, I can play goalkeeper, sure. So I jumped in, and I thought it was really fun. He came back, and the following year, I went into the midfield because he was there. He was bigger than me. He was older than me. He was good. And then he graduated, and then I went back. And when I went to train, about then, to be honest, I was a bit more of a tennis player than a soccer player. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I just tried to figure it out. I think I was curious because we would, okay, this diving stuff, it probably shouldn't hurt. If you're doing it and it hurts, you're probably doing it wrong. So I kept trying to figure it out. And I was, I was in that stage of sports sampling. So I did soccer, basketball, and tennis on a regular basis. Fall soccer, winter's basketball, spring is tennis, and summer, to be honest, for me was mostly tennis. When I got to college, and I went to Furman University, they recruited me for tennis. When I got down there, I decided I'd play soccer, and I figured out pretty quick I'm an okay Division I tennis player, but I was a pretty decent Division I soccer player. So I kind of stuck with soccer. And that's when I started to figure out, okay, I want to get better at this. I want to really get better at this. So I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, South Glens Falls. It's probably, 4.5 hours north of New York. And a guy in Glens Falls across the river, Charlie Moore, was kind of in the same boat. He was a goalkeeper, and we're going to try and figure out what we can do. Yeah. So there was this old Italian guy, Harold Sodano, and he would work with forwards in this little lot right next to an insurance building. And so Charlie and I would go, and these forwards would shoot on us, and Harold occasionally would try and tell us something. And we kind of did a lot of learning by doing in terms of models or, other sources of education. There was a 1-hour show, Soccer Made in Germany, on Sunday nights. And I always used to watch and wait for like Sepp Meyer to make an appearance, or, I just watched the goalkeepers, and I would just watch them for an hour and go, okay, yeah, I kind of see what they did. I'm going to try and do that, the couple nights a week that we would go play with Harold. And Charlie and I were pretty creative. And I will still tell the stories about, what we did for training. We didn't have much money. So we would take an old soccer ball, and we just took a knife, stabbed it, cut a slot in it, filled it up with sand, taped it back up. And South Glens Falls and Glens Falls are on the Hudson River. And so they had a beach, crack beach. It wasn't really, you want to lay on the sand without a towel, and don't do that. But we would go to the beach in the summer and toss the medicine ball back and forth. And on that sand, as I mentioned, you're in full pants, long sleeves, gloves.
Yeah.
So you working up a great sweat. You got sand all over you, in your ears, up your nose, everything.
Yeah.
But after 30 minutes, your legs are jelly.
Yeah.
It really facilitated us to extend our range, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so to get to more realistic training, there was a community college that had a nice tennis complex with a big fence. So Charlie and I would, in the mornings, I would teach tennis in the mornings. I'd pedal my bike, I don't know, 10 miles to the community college. Charlie and I would shoot on each other on a grass field with the big fence behind us, so we didn't have to chase anything. And we'd do that for an hour or two. Then we'd ride our bikes down to the beach, do the med ball routine. And then that night, either I would probably go back to teaching tennis. And then Charlie would go and work at the Y in Glens Falls. And we would do that for a couple of summers. And you can start to develop.
Yeah.
Obviously a coach would have steamrolled that and made that occur a lot quicker. But we just had to figure it out by doing.
Yeah.
And I think that helped me, looking forward in my coaching, because I did stuff on my own. So I had to figure out what worked and why on my own. And that enabled me to then rationalize the thing that I would talk about with other keepers is, okay, this is why you do this. Because if you do it differently, here's what's going to happen. I know I tried it and this didn't work. So it worked pretty well for me.
Yeah. So it's almost like process of elimination of trying a bunch of things and then, yeah.
This works, so we'll stick with it.
I like that.
And then, there was a decent soccer community for such a small town. There's a pretty decent soccer community. And they had the AASL, Amateur Adirondack Soccer League. And we would play in that. And they would train 2 nights a week. Didn't matter what team you were on. Everybody just went to train at the same field. And it'd be pickup, from 6 to 8 at night. So it was a lot of chance to play on a regular basis. So we played a lot. It was of varying levels, depending on who showed up. It might be a 99 game. It might be a 66 game. It might be a really good game. It might be a little bit weaker game. Yeah. But we did a lot of learning by doing. And that was fun. I mean, I enjoy learning by doing. I enjoy teaching myself stuff. I also understand that there's other ways to go about doing this. So I'm going to kind of fast forward through college.
Let me pause here because I want to jump to that point, but just before we leave it, do you remember a moment or a time or a person or whether it's Setmeyer watching someone where you saw something or heard something where you thought, I've never thought about that before, but that makes a lot of sense. Like, I want to try that. I want to do that. Do you have any of those moments?
Yeah, there was a game. I wish I could tell you. It was something I can't recall the goalkeeper, but a high ball to the right. They're going with the high hand. I'm going like, why do you go with this hand is closer? Go with this hand, not this hand. But then as I watched the replay, I'm going like, yeah, but when he steps, and we're not full screen, but when he steps with this foot, that's the foot. Like if I'm taking a layup, that's the foot I step and I jump with, and I go with this hand. So when I take this foot closer, that drives this hand up and over. And I do the analogy to basketball because I played a lot of basketball too. I'm going, oh, that makes sense now. And I still will see now when I work with younger goalkeepers, kids that go with this hand for ball over here, I'm going like, if you could dunk, how would you dunk? And say, I run up and I jump off of this leg with this hand. I'm going, okay, if you dunk with this hand, jump with this leg in this hand. I'm going, okay, that's the leg you want to jump with. You want that closer to the ball. And then you want this hand, it's the contralateral movements. That's what you want. And that's how it made sense to me. So when I teach that's how I try and have it make sense to the kids I'm working with. And it usually is pretty effective. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Can you tell me a little bit more, and you can kind of go into the college years here, but I feel like the before the back pass rule, that error gets almost like diminished or even demonized. Of like, well, the goalkeepers, they weren't playing with their feet. It was easier. Can you talk about the era of like what maybe gets misunderstood or forgotten about, or just not totally understood completely as far as the pre-back pass era?
Yeah. No, it was great. Pick up everything up.
Yeah.
Let's back me up, pick it back up. But what happened because of that is, there are teams that will press now, but teams pressed a lot more then because they didn't want to allow them to back pass to me. So they'd throw an extra player forward, an extra 2 players forward to prevent that. My distribution, if I ever had to distribute with my feet, would just be, I'm just going to knock it long and get it out of, beat the pressure. Just get it out, beat the pressure. You had to be pretty clever because you're picking everything up. And I don't know if I can jump. Can I jump ahead a little bit to one?
That makes sense. Talk about whatever you want. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We were playing Tampa Bay, and a guy, Steve Wagerly, South African guy, was up front for the Rowdies, and we're up like 2-1, I think, something like that. So I'm just playing it to a back. He's playing it to me. Playing it to a back. He's playing it to me. And Steve is like a dog in a bone show with Steve going back and forth. And I picked it up once, and he puts his hands on his. He's like, "How is this a PG broadcast or?" Is this...
Say you want. You're good. Yeah.
Okay. He puts his hands on. He's like, "You know what? This is so frigging stupid, but the fans get crazy about me if I don't do it." And I'm going, "Yeah, man. Hey, sorry, but I'm gonna keep doing it." And it was funny because he knew that without his teammates up the press, it was just pointless. But anyway, so we never really worked on developing much with our feet aside from just knocking it long. The nuances now. Goalkeepers using both feet. Goalkeepers able to drive, chip, float, bend, passes like that. I think that's great. I think it's really, really nice. One of the things in terms of how that was viewed was I did a lot of work with Tony DeChico. And Tony and I were at North Carolina watching a game because Tony wanted to watch Jen Renola, who was a goalkeeper for Notre Dame, who was very good and trying to get to the national team. So we're watching, the ball came down Jen's left side. She was right-footed. So she comes out with her right foot, blasts it, bends to the left into the stands. And I'm going like, and she got to use her left foot. And Tony's like, yeah, but you know what? If her left foot is not good, she's going to turn the ball over. So, okay, you gave up a throw-in, but you gave up a throw-in 50 yards from the goal.
Yeah.
So Tony, that helped my perspective in saying like, okay, let's not try and take a goalkeeper and turn him into a midfielder. Let's say, okay, yeah, in a perfect world, you drive it with your left foot and bend it inside the line. But the reality is, I'm not a midfielder, and I want to make sure that we beat pressure. We don't turn the ball over here, but the change of possession occurs way up there, and we've got time to get back and get organized, stuff like that. So I'm always a little bit, and again, I'm going to get more away from my background, but what is the advantages and disadvantages with the a lot of youth games have play out lines where you can't press in front of this line, so the goalkeeper can play to the back to go, stuff like that. And as a coach, I just really dislike the fact that now whenever a goalkeeper gets the ball, that's their first look. So I'm going to play my back here. Yeah. And it's like, I don't want a midfielder that's their first look. Their first look is there. Now, if I can't do that, okay, then I do this.
Yeah.
And I just think that, okay, goalkeepers play with your feet, but don't play like a little, a ticky-tack midfielder kind. You still want to break as many lines, beat as many players as possible. And so I think that the emphasis on foot skills is good because now they can strike a ball over distance longer, farther than, I could and farther than the other goalkeepers from my era could. But I think we've also got to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I get really frustrated anytime a keeper, asked me for a black and white, like what should I have done there? It's just like every moment in goalkeeping is scripted now, that like there's a specific right and wrong, and and all the things you talk about with your childhood. There's so many things that I'm sure there's things you did where you look back and like that wasn't really smart, or that didn't get a return, or that didn't go how I thought it would. But that explorative process, especially at a younger age, so important. Even when you're getting into those college years, like, yes, there's less exploring. However, you're still figuring out your style. And so that very like scripted, hey, do this every single time, like gets this robotic mindset where you stop looking for advantages and you start looking for the way to kind of pop your opponent and just, well, coach told me to do this. Okay. Well, it's like, well, when the play breaks down, you're going to have trouble because like I can't script every moment for you, No,
but you're exactly right. So many goalkeepers, as I said, when they get the ball, their first initial movement is to turn and look to play to the back. Like, no, can you get the ball over the top? Can you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to talk about UNC, but before we get there, your playing career is at a really interesting time for me, and I could go into a lot of the weeds here, but there's kind of two big points I wanted to hit. But really, that the 1990 season with the Capitals. So you're playing in the one of the many leagues that doesn't exist anymore, but the APSL, and y'all are doing well. You're having a good season. But opposite of you is Arnie Mauser. So I guess walk me through a little bit of what you remember, not only from like that time, but I guess specifically Mauser, who's obviously did a lot at his time, but is kind of a forgotten keeper as well.
No, I remember Arnie because he played for Fort Lauderdale when I played for Albany. So after games, the clubs have restaurants and bars you're supposed to go to. So we would go to restaurants and bars, and the goalkeepers end up talking. Yeah. Overall, in that era, it was fun, but it was such a unstable makes it sound bad, but uncertain era. I mean, like, after games, are we going to get paid?
Yeah.
Oh, you can hand me an envelope with a check. That's great, but who's going to take this check?
Yeah.
The joke was the fastest we ever moved was when we got our paychecks, because the first 8 checks cleared, and after that, you had to come back. There are, all sorts of stories about that. And I don't know if we've got the time for all of them. But it was an interesting year because of that. Having said that, the level of play was pretty good. I think that we were limited in terms of the facilities we could train at, the amount of time. Like, if you could work, you would work and then come to matches and then, train when you could. I was lucky because when the Capitals were in existence, I was teaching school in upstate New York. And so I kind of had the summers off. So that enabled me to train and be around for teams. I ended up doing a lot of clinics and stuff like that, which professional clubs did at the time to try and get kids to come. Arnie was a nice guy. He's a funny guy. We had some interesting conversations because if you know Arnie, he's a big guy. He's much bigger than I am, but he played much closer to his line than I did. And I remember we were in Fort Lauderdale. Oh, Arnie, man, look at you, look at me. Why are you so much on your line? He's going like, it works. And he didn't have any real other rationale for it, except this is the way I've always played, and I've been successful. So, it's not broken. Why try to fix it? And so it was interesting. And we had some other conversations about things. That's when I think we were starting to see a lot more education come into it, specifically with the Tony DiCicco and Soccer Plus camps, and then Dr. Joe Matchnick with the number 1 camps. So we chat about, did you ever work one of those? Did you do this, that, the other thing? And I don't know, it's funny because one time he goes, no, when I retire as a player, I just want to drive a Budweiser truck. Well, good luck,
you know what you want to do. Okay.
You're a big guy. You can probably reach those cases way up top. But no, he was good. And I think he does not, I don't think he gets justice in terms of how people remember him. He's got a couple of caps, if I'm right, but
yeah, he got for an era that didn't play as near as many games at the time. Like he got, I'm trying to think where he ended up. I want to say in the 30s. I mean, he got a lot of caps because he was just around for so long. So
but he was, at the end of the day, you want to stop the other team from scoring, and Arnie did that. Arnie did that. It wasn't like he's flashy or a high flyer or these, flying, diving saves. No, but at the same time, he was there and he kept the ball out of the net. So he, that's at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Yeah, fair enough. Can you tell me a bit about what it was like to be playing professionally before MLS, where the national team has a college kid as a starting goalkeeper? Because I obviously now, looking in hindsight, Tony Meola, big name, did a lot of big things. But I'm just curious at the time what the vibe was or what conversations were like of, hey, I'm busting my ass here and I'm playing at a level that's higher than college. But then this, 20-year-old is on the national team. What was whether was it you or another goalkeeper? I guess I'm just curious how people internalized something that, if it were done today, I think a lot of people would really kind of laugh and scratch their heads at.
Yeah, I think it was much more difficult to get exposure then. That was Bora Moltanovic was the coach, and he's limited. There's not millions of games where you can go and watch. So if he came to watch, you were like really excited. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna have a good game. And I didn't have a reputation. I mean, I had some good seasons, but it wasn't like, I don't know, I was on people's radar. The indoor game was really big then, and I think that got a little bit more notoriety. The only time Bora came to watch me was because we were playing against San Francisco, who also had Mark Doherty. And Mark and I have kept in touch. I usually see him every summer in North Carolina. He'll come and do the camp at North Carolina, and I'll do the camp at North Carolina.
Yeah.
But he came, if you ask me, he came to see me. But if you ask Bora, he came to see Mark. And unfortunately, Mark had a bad game. I had a good game, but I didn't get any calls. We beat them. It was in Albany. But Mark ended up having he was younger than me at the time, but he had a much lengthier career because he stuck around for MLS. And went there. It was kind of an interesting thing because when MLS started, people were excited about it, but I think based on a lot of players, based on their experience in the ASL and the APSL, were just like, I don't know. And that was kind of my feelings. My last season with the Capitals, they go bankrupt. I get married. I got a teaching job, and nobody knows what this MLS thing is going to turn out. So it's kind of like, no, okay, I'm going to move on. I think there were a lot of players that felt like that. They just weren't sure. The guys that played indoor, they probably had more money because they were playing more games throughout the year. But they were. If you remember those Game Boys, the little. The MISL guys were great at Tetris because they spent so much time in vans driving from,
that's funny.
Philadelphia to Washington to wherever, to Cleveland to Wichita in a van.
Yeah,
they're just like all day at this, and they were so much better than us at Tetris.
That's funny.
I think that nobody was sure, so it's kind of like, okay, Tony Meola is young enough to gamble on MLS, and also has the backing of having caps and having a national team experience. But for other people, it was kind of like, distrusted owners, but
Mark Daugherty is one that I've come across over the years. He's not the only one where I kind of wonder if there was this sort of sense of like, man, from y'all's end as players, of thinking of like what could have been or what I could have been, when the investment and the opportunities were basically zero. Like you've got a league coming and going, you've got teams coming and going. Even when MLS shows up, they go from 10 to 8 teams. They lose teams pretty quickly. Like finally they start getting some traction. And there's that whole era where like there's a certain handful of guys that were able to keep traction, and Mauser's a great example of one who just kept playing and got enough notoriety of that they could stay afloat. But there's this whole host of players that we almost, it's kind of like a multiple loss of generation of players that just like were talented but kind of ran out of like opportunities and essentially money at some point.
No, yeah, that's true. You gotta pay the bills at the end of the day. But I think that, I don't know, there were some people that were kind of determined to keep playing. There was a guy that played with Pedro de Brito, and I can remember, riding in a van with Pedro, and he went to UConn, and he had a pretty successful, because Joe Moroni was there. That was the UConn team did really well, and he was doing outdoor with us and indoor with somebody, I forget who. And he just looked at me. He goes, "Man, you got it made. You teach. Your paychecks never bounce. Never have to argue with an owner." And I think the fact that I remember that means it had a pretty big impact on me at the time. And it was like, okay, I mean, I'm not upset or anything that we didn't have an MLS. No, we didn't. That's it. I'm not going to change that. I played. I was happy. I survived. I got good memories. Yeah. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, you keep moving through open doors. That's all you can really do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A big open door shows up in '93, I believe, is when you show up at UNC.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through a little bit of, you've transitioned and you're teaching at some point. I guess in some sense it seems a little natural now to like look back of like, oh yeah, goalkeeper coach, this makes sense. But I'm sure at the time there's some moving pieces with it. And certainly going from, playing on the men's side to coaching at UNC on the women's side, that is a bit of a jump. So walk me through a little bit as far as like how that came to be, and more specifically, like, why did you make that decision? Because that is a bit of a turn.
Yeah. What had happened was when I stopped playing, I started doing camps with Tony DeChico, and I got along with Tony great. And I was young back then, so I could demonstrate things. So the way it would work is Tony, he had really thought out a curriculum, and Tony had set some really good ideas that, still apply. And I still coach those ideas today. You can tweak it, change it, and YouTube's full of all these different new ideas and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, and I keep saying that, sorry, what Tony put out in his curriculum, it's lasted. I mean, there are plenty of Soccer Plus alum that are coaching at pretty high levels.
Yeah.
Chris Stuckart at North Carolina, Mark Doherty's a Soccer Plus alum. Graham Abel, who's with the national team, is a Soccer Plus alum. There's a whole lot of coaches that have done really well, having come up through Tony's education and working for Tony. And so anyway, I was kind of like the number one guy, and Tony and I would have great conversations about goalkeeping, about, here's what I think would work here. Here's what I want to, okay, the ball's down there. Do I stand side on? Do I stand square? How do I, this kind of thing. And I started to get into a little bit more into the science of it at the time. And so that was just, Tony, man, let's talk more. We're staying up late talking about stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just gotten my master's from Furman University, and I went to coach at a school called Greensboro College in Greensboro, North Carolina, Division III school that didn't have 2 dimes to scrape together. And so Tony called Anson and said, "Hey, this guy Bill's in Greensboro. You should talk to him." And so Anson called me, and I had known Tracy from Soccer Plus. And so And I knew obviously of Anson's reputation, and they won national championships, and yeah, that would be a good thing. So I ended up going there while I began work from a doctorate at UNCG. So I had some pretty long days because they at the time it was just part time. So I'm coaching. They practiced at 2 to 3:30, 90 minutes. You could set your watch on it. So before that, I would drive over to Duke, and I coached the men goalkeepers, Duke, just the goalkeepers, not with the team, just the goalkeepers separately, and then drive over to Chapel Hill and coach the goalkeepers prior to the team training and within the team training. So that was tremendous for me because I had such good goalkeepers to work with, such levels of commitment. I mean, Duke at that time had Garth Lagerwey, who is big time in MLS administration. I think he was like president of the Sounders, I think, for a while, and he played with the Sounders. So I had some pretty high level goalkeepers that I'm working with. At North Carolina, we had Tracy and Shelly Finger, who both, Shelly not as much as Tracy, had national team experience. So what a treat for a coach. Here's who you're coaching. I mean, that's so much good. And they're both, Tracy and Shelly are both very bright, very committed. I mean, work rate here, everybody else has done it. Their work rate is up there. And that's how I became successful. A lot of it was work rate. So, I got along with them very well. And my coaching there developed because I had a good foundation of technique and a pretty good handle on tactics. But I also knew that Tracy had a very similar background, both working with Tony. And so we could kind of say, oh, let's do this drill with a certain name. Let's do the, 3-man roll, that kind of thing, some kind of name, whatever. And Tracy would go, oh, yeah. Shelly didn't recognize the name, so we'd have to walk her through it. But she's really bright. So it's like, boom, first time through, boom,
cool,
go. The other nice thing there was we had 4 goalkeepers all the time. Sonia Trejak is one. She's now a pediatrician in Chapel Hill, I think. And then Jen Eames, who ended up playing in the Olympics for team handball as a goalkeeper. But those two, it was pretty clear they're not going to play. There was a gap. Tracy and Shelly are really, here's Tracy, here's Shelly, here's Tracy, here's Shelly, here's Jen, and here's Sonia.
Yeah.
Down. But I coached them all the same. I coached them and said, okay, yeah, if Sonia, if you're doing something wrong, I'm going to coach you on that. I'm not going to let it, it's just Sonia now. No, I coached that. I probably gave more attention to Tracy and Shelly because they're the two that are going to play. And Sonia and Jen appreciated that because they knew it's not like they were questioning, whether, Tracy and Shelly are better. They knew. The team knew. So they kind of understood they're not going to get as much attention, but they're not going to be ignored. They're not going to be used as tools. They'll be treated and respected for their roles. So it worked out. It's a real fun experience for me because here I've got some goalkeepers that are, they each have national team potential. They each could be there.
Yeah.
And this is when the national team started the women's side, national team started to really take off.
Yeah.
Because Anson missed a year before I got there in China to win the World Cup, the first World Cup. So they're really starting to get some notoriety. It changed a little bit because I was really part-time. I would, show up at practice and that was about it. I'd travel, but I wasn't involved in any administration. I wasn't involved in recruiting, things like that. So I didn't have as much input as to who would be replacing those two when they left. Shelly was a year older than Tracy. She left, and then Tracy had a senior year, and that was the year that we won in Portland. We won the NCAA tournament in Portland. So it was really good to work with them. I know you've asked about the splitting time, so can I segue to that now? Will that
yes.
work?
Yeah, I really want to hear about like Tracy and Shelly. So that's kind of where I'm You go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no. This is where they were both, like you said, here's Tracy, here's Shelley, here's Tracy, here's Shelley. They're really cool. So we're trying to think, how do we accommodate them? And this is the era when, there's some very good teams. George Mason was very good. UMass was very good. Duke was very good. But there were other teams that weren't good. So if we split games, said you get this game, you get the other game, there was a good chance that you'd get a game where you maybe touch the ball a couple of times. You don't do it. So to get around, I said, well, let's split halves, split the game in halves. Each kid gets a half. But Anson, let's have somebody start and switch. So it's like this game, Tracy's going to start. Shelley's going to have the second half. This
was your idea?
Yeah. Shelley's going to start, and then Tracy's, because there's something to be said for starting.
Sure.
And what we ended up doing, and this is where Anson came in a little bit more, was saying, okay, that's great. They're going to play all the regular season games up to and I think we did it for both the ACC tournament when they had an ACC tournament. We're not going to split time anymore. We're picking one of them. One of them will win the competition, and that's who's going to start in the tournaments. We didn't do with goalkeeping, because of the nature of goalkeeping and training, we didn't keep data for a competitive college and for goalkeepers. The field players were involved in the competitive college and the goalkeepers weren't, but they knew this is their competition. They're going to compete against each other in games. And Tracy, I think, kind of appreciated that, and that was exciting for her. I think Shelley probably not as much, because prior to them splitting games, Shelley started, Tracy didn't. And so when that came about, I think Tracy was excited because, again, now I'm getting halves. And Shelley not as much. Then Shelley had a couple of games where, like, we lost to Duke at home, and that was a big deal because we had won like 90-something. We hadn't lost in like 90 games or so.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that was the first ever loss at home to North Carolina, and it was to Duke. And I think that was very distressing to Shelley. And so she didn't like that system as much because it didn't, due to a variety of different factors, it didn't really work out for her. In this era, obviously one of them just would said, no, I'm going to this school A, B, C, or D, because anybody would take them and be happy. But at this point, that was the best option. And also both of them are really bright individuals. So they appreciated North Carolina's a good school. So they said, no, this is a good school. I want to be here. I want the competition. Funny thing. I want to add to that. One thing is, okay, so we did that. Shelley graduates. Tracy is the heir apparent. But you talked about when younger goalkeepers are coming in. Well, we had Siri Mullenix came in spring before she had, her first fall. And Siri, we didn't split time. Siri just sat next to me. And this was really another, it's not just one system. You don't just always have to split time, but Siri sat next to me and we chat about, look, you see it? Tracy didn't go for that ball. Why don't you? What do you think she was looking at? Made her decide. We'd have those kind of conversations. So that was great fun because, again, Siri's another bright individual. So we had some really good conversations sitting there. And then obviously she'd get in, she'd play. Yeah. But she didn't start. She didn't get the same minutes as Tracy. But she sat there, and then obviously she just zoomed. As soon as she took over, she just boom. And I'd like to think that those conversations had something to do with it because there wasn't any pressure on her. She could ask questions. She could throw out her ideas. And I think that she really developed into it because she's been a very successful coach now. She's been with Eddie Radwanski and Jeff Robbins at Clemson.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how long, probably 15, 20 years. So she's done very well for herself in terms of taking her knowledge and now sharing it with the younger goalkeepers.
Yeah. Yeah. You had in a very short time, I know Shelley and Siri didn't cross over, but 3 very talented goalkeepers. I mean, that's a really strong stretch there. And Tracy had talked about, her freshman year specifically being really tough. She had briefly thought about transferring.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until the later years where she started kind of gathering her feet. I'm trying my best to not put words in her mouth, but basically, basically this idea, like, it was very uncomfortable. And of course, they both want to play. And there wasn't any specific animosity of like, well, Shelley's done something wrong. I hate her for that. It wasn't anything like that. There was, I think it sounds like it was difficult to work together in some sense of knowing, hey, this person's kind of blocking my pathway. I guess I'm curious from your point of view, how did you go about managing that? Because I'm sure even as you're thinking of splitting time, you're probably also thinking, well, here are the negatives with it. Like here's what comes with it. So you've got, both those two, but even Siri as well, you've got a hyper competitive environment that you're working very intimately with. And I'm sure you're picking up on some frustrations on certain days here and there. How did you go about managing to make sure, hey, everyone's moving forward here and making sure things don't erode and kind of fall off?
Yeah. The point you made about Tracy being very distressed about her position occurred earlier before we went to the splitting time, and she had thought about transferring. Excuse me. She mentioned, who's it? I think maybe Lakeisha Bean was at Notre Dame at that time. And Tracy knew she was better than Lakeisha. But Lakeisha had obviously a great career at Notre Dame, but Tracy felt like, I could go to Notre Dame and I could play. And I didn't disagree with her. I kind of said, okay, yeah, you could, but number one, you're just kind of like running from a challenge. And Tracy understood that, but at the same time, she was really distressed at times. She had a pretty serious, I'm sure you spoke with her about her back. She had a pretty serious back injury. She's doing all she can to come back from that. And she's not getting as much playing time as she would like. So I really had to convince her of, okay, long term. I forget who was it, the goalkeeper coach before that. I know Carla Chin, she's Carla Brown now, was she's another Soccer Plus alum. She came on that, I think she's junior or senior year. So there wasn't, I said, prior to Carla getting there, I don't remember who the other coaches, but I didn't know them. So I said, well, I don't know what you'd be getting in terms of coaching. Yeah. With me, you know what you're going to get. And I think she appreciated that. And I think it was a really trying time for Tracy. I can say these things and she understands them, but you know what? I'm still not happy because I'm not playing. And then when we came up with the splitting time thing, I think that really energized Tracy, and she rose with that. At the same time, now if you're Shelley, you're going like, wait a minute, I played, 90 minutes every game except for, once it got to be 4-0, then I didn't play. And so it turned into a little bit of a bit more of a struggle for Shelley. In hindsight, you'd say, okay, well, let's split time every year. But I think part of that was Shelley came in a little bit more polished, a little bit taller than Tracy. And I think at the time, I would almost say, and again, I felt that, Tracy went through some hard times, but I go through some hard times with that because I don't want Tracy, especially since I knew her so much. We worked so many weeks at camp together. I didn't like to see her unhappy. But at the same time, you know what? You're not ready to start. And you're going to get there. But when you're in Tracy's position, you don't want to hear you're going to get there. You want to hear I'm there. And so I think that was difficult for Tracy. It's funny because I saw they were both together was it a year ago or 2 years ago? They had an alumni reception at one of the Carolina games, and so I went, and Tracy and Shelley were both there, and they're hanging out together, laughing with each other, stuff like that. And I think they knew what their feelings were and what they were sharing with me during the time they were there, because they both kind of pulled me aside and said, that splitting time thing, that was really good. I wasn't happy at the time from Shelley, it's good for, but they both said, yeah, that really was good. So finally, after 20 years, I can sleep easy.
You got some justification there. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious hearing about working with Anson as well, because you've got Tony DeChico, who's notorious goalkeeping legend, and has a huge goalkeeping coaching tree, as you've already alluded to. But Anson, not really a goalkeeping guy. However, UNC, we did a couple months ago. We did a tournament to find out which school was goalkeeper which school had produced the best goalkeepers, and we tried to make it as interesting as we could, but obviously it was UNC by a long shot. It just wasn't even close. Okay. And so I guess I'm curious of, you've got Anson, who's got this legendary track record of goalkeepers, of high quality goalkeepers. But even talking to Tracy, she had mentioned that she had earned the nickname like One Goal Tracy or whatever it was. And so I guess I'm curious, behind the scenes of working with Anson, who not quite as a goalkeeping person as DeChico, what those conversations were like. Were there moments where you had to either explain or defend a goalkeeper, or say, hey, Anson, I really don't think that's a good idea? Like, what were those conversations about goalkeeping with Anson like?
They're interesting because, Anson and I talk a lot to this day. He still speaks at my sports psychology classes.
Yeah.
He doesn't really know a lot about goalkeeping.
Will he admit that? Does he say that?
Well, yeah, he would that, but I think one of the things he would say, and I would agree with wholeheartedly, is he can recognize people that are competitive. And I think he recognized that Tracy and Shelley were competitive, and that competition, that drove them. I mean, their work rates were off the charts. I mean, I've known professional goalkeepers. No, they're not working the same level as those two. Those guys worked, and they battled, and that battling really, kind of iron sharpens iron kind of thing. That battle in practice prepared them for matches and their later careers. I think Anson, he knew, okay, this person gives up more goals than that person, and then he also knew that this person would have that competitive urge that also drove, in terms of their communication with the backs, because that's when we were the 3-4-3 all the time. So you got three backs, and they're pushed way up high. Yeah. We have our three backs sometimes in the other team's defensive half.
Wow.
And again, the communication in that situation has to be spot on. So he wanted goalkeepers that could communicate and could get the respect of the backs. So when I say, no, you guys got to drop, that they drop. They don't turn around and go, let's think about, she says drop, let's think about it. No, you don't have time, drop. And I think Anson recognized that in both Tracy and Shelley, is that they commanded the respect of the backs. He could see that. He doesn't know which foot they should dive with. He doesn't know which hand to go with. He doesn't know those kind of things. But he knows that person there, they don't want to give up a goal. They don't want to give up a goal bad.
Yeah.
That's driving them. And so he recognized that. And I think he appreciated that a lot. And I think the goalkeepers knew that. So that, okay, so he wants competitive. I'll show him competitive. And that, the competition, just the competitive nature of it all just got really, really good. And people will often have a negative view of competition, but competition drives performance. And they knew that. They competed hard against each other. They didn't wish the other one to get hurt. They didn't wish the other one to get scored on. They'd wish for the other team to shoot more on them than on, I want to face more shots than Shelly. Shelly's, I want to face more shots than Tracy, because that'll give me more opportunities to tell the world how good I am. But at the same time, they each want the team to win. And I think the field players appreciated that. And I think Anson understood that. And like I said, he's not going to coach the technical aspects. He could probably have a decent idea about the tactical aspects, but he just liked the fact that they competed, they battled, and through those traits, the field players, the backs listened to them and respected them. I think that's what Anson recognized.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that all tracks. I was trying to think of like, okay, if you're not really a goalkeeper guy, how do you make a decision? And especially at that environment, it's probably, you can almost boil it down to like, who hates getting scored on? Like, like this is not, you have that level of drive and, motivation that like, this is not going to happen to me. Like, it probably gets you on the field at UNC pretty well.
Anson would ask me about, okay, well, what do you think in terms of who should play and stuff like that? And I'd say, well, I wouldn't say Shelly's the starter, Tracy should start. I would say right now, I think Shelly's playing a bit better. Right now, Tracy's playing a little bit better.
Yeah.
I would have those kind of conversations. The biggest things I think I had with Anson was like, when one of them had a rough patch, I'd say, Anson, you should have a word with Shelly. Anson, you should have a word with Tracy. Because each of those two, Tracy and Shelly, had rough patches.
Sure.
Where they were kind of down. And if I did that, and Anson would have a lot of meetings in his office. He'd try and say, Shelly, can you come by? Tracy, can you come by? And he would mention something about that.
Yeah.
So I think Anson was good about understanding, when that drive goes south. He was good about recognizing that.
Yeah. Was there anything that you had to tell Anson, hey, stop doing this? This is not helpful, or anything surrounding the goalkeeper, whether on or off the field, you were like, hey, like this is actually pulling us back from the direction we want to go?
I don't think so. I mean, Tracy and Shelly would probably answer that better than me. But I think Anson he knew what he didn't know.
Yeah.
So if somebody is flying and pulls the ball out of the corner, anybody knows, man, that is fantastic. That's great athleticism. That's great technique. They really read that shot. That's fine. That's easy. And I think Anson did that. But at the same time, Anson didn't pretend to know things he didn't know. He's more than comfortable, more than confident in what he does know.
Yeah.
But I think that it was that kind of an atmosphere where he'd kind of like hold back, and if he saw something that was obviously great, he would mention that's great. If there were issues, he'd ask me, but otherwise, we didn't really have issues, except as I mentioned, for kind of like I hate to say moods, not moods, but the outlook on the competitions at times.
Yeah.
And that's when I would have a word, and Anson was about following through.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, this time period is also really fascinating to me because you're starting to see goalkeepers enter levels and ranks with a little bit more information than the previous goalkeeper. So when I talked to Saskia Weber, who but she had mentioned how the training that she had gotten before she even got to the national team was just more information than like the veterans that had come before her. But there was also a continuing process of, these younger keepers keep getting more and more information. And when I talked to Janine Sapara, she mentioned how the WUSA, that it was a little frustrating on her end of watching, I'm trying not to put words in her mouth, but watching young goalkeepers be at the premier level when they were still very, very young. But also again, you still got this process of these young goalkeepers getting a lot of information. So I guess I'm curious on your end of, I'm sure Soccer Plus is kind of at the epicenter of all this, but just looking back of, you grew up playing, the weird sand soccer ball. I don't know if you had a name for that, like drill or anything, but like you're just kind of trying to do anything you can where, before you're getting goalkeepers, whether at UNC or Oregon, they've actually learned a bit. So I guess I'm curious, I'm looking back at that, how quickly that changed and how that, directed certain things. I don't know if you have any thoughts specifically on that time.
Well, no, I think I would just embellish on what you just said about Soccer Plus having a huge influence, because this was a time when, we would run a 6-day camp. And nowadays, I don't know if anybody, Texas A&M runs a 4-day camp, but people don't run camps the same length, partially because kids are playing so much.
Yeah. And
so when kids would come to Soccer Plus, they got a tremendous education, because we didn't, in the evening sometimes, okay, we're just going to play. But in the morning for sometimes 2.5, 3 hours, they're training and being told why certain things, you do certain things, not just told to do this stuff, but do this stuff and here's why. So Tony was a really good educator. And obviously I sponged off of that. Chris Dukar sponged off of that. John Pasquarella, Matt. I just tick Tracy, all his names. And I think that had a huge effect, because now we're getting young females getting this kind of an education that the females on the staff didn't get. So the females on the staff got the education because they watched Tony, they learned from that. These younger kids are getting it and training it. And so I think that was a big part of it. I think that is probably one of the biggest things about the younger goalkeepers kind of advancing more rapidly. I think that the whole thing is kind of, it's not solely Soccer Plus. I think a lot of times, Soccer Plus was there, but as the women's game grew, as obviously 99 had a tremendous impact on women's youth soccer in this country. And I think that it's a combination of things. It's Soccer Plus, it's Tony DeChico, it's women's soccer. And I think that was a big part of it. Again, I have limited national team experience, so I wasn't in the room on conversations about, like, well, is she too young? I don't know those situations occurred. If I'm a coach, I'm going like, I've got this tournament that I am outcome dependent on. So I don't care if she's young, who's the best. There are other situations where I can be a little bit more developed. Well, let's bring so-and-so in. She's a bit young, but let's get her used to a camp. And I know sometimes younger goalkeepers were born in national camps just for the opportunity to experience a national team camp. And then I think it kind of evolved that way.
I had I was surprised to see the email, but I had a student who's in school now, and she emailed me asking, she's doing a report on Hope Solo. And I was like, through it, I was like, hey, this is great. And so she just asked me a few questions about her career, and she asked something about, was it easy for Hope to get into the national team? And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure she was the last college goalkeeper to get into that, like the last goalkeeper who was in college to be called into a national team camp. I could be wrong in that, but to think at the very least now, that would just be unheard of. You would never pull in a college keeper who would seriously compete, maybe into a camp there or something, but like getting caps, like that was Hope was just way ahead of the curve as far as, well, the different environment, I guess I should say. But then also hyper competitive. So I don't know, easy, had the talent, yes, but also as you're alluding to, like, you're young, it's difficult, like there's pros and cons with being good at young. So it's just an interesting era to look back on, because you're seeing these like younger keepers continuing to usurp keepers that are not 35 or 40 or kind of on the downslope of their career. It's like these other keepers are beating out are 25, 26, 27. So no, that's a really interesting interesting time. But I like hearing about Soccer Plus because it seems like it has a huge knock-on effect. Because you've got these insular moments camps. Y'all didn't run like a 2-month thing with keepers came for a little bit and then they left, but there was this huge knock-on effect of, well, they came here, they got a lot of information and got a lot of good stuff, and then they went on and they did their thing, and then that led to something else, and then that led to something else. It's not like a homogenous, it's like controlling thing. It's just like you come here and then you bounce.
But again, I don't know if I want to say the pace of things was slower then, but I mean, you get kids and you would see them the next summer and they're this much taller, they're this much stronger, and they had been through that, because it's physically taxing. What do you say? Every kid that leaves here sleeps a lot on the way home because there is such difficult training. But you would get kids on a regular basis. They come this year, they come next year, because it was such a good experience. And so I think that kind of snowball things, because you'd have a kid, and then from year to year, we would tweak some things. A lot of stuff, would stay the same, because again, it's addressing this issue. We're teaching this topic. We don't necessarily need to have a new way to teach it, but there's now a new topic based on the game, stuff like that. I think with the younger goalkeepers, especially back then, not having a real established women's league, a lot of those younger keepers got by on athleticism. Whereas if you look at on the male side, your best goalkeepers are in their 30s. Why? Because they played all throughout their 20s and they're still playing when they're 30s. A lot of women don't do that because of the structure of leagues and so forth. And those younger goalkeepers coming in. As the female goalkeepers get more, and I want to say, I think maybe Ashlyn Harris is probably a good example of this. As they age, they kind of get better. And I think that was a limiting factor for some of them early on in the obviously different incarnations of women's professional soccer in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, it's becoming more common now. Even just 5 years ago, the amount of goalkeepers on the women's side that were playing that were over 30, I mean, like, in the worldwide, it's just very few. It's not many. And then, that's why I always loved watching or tracking Nicole Barnhart's career, because she just kept playing. And it was really cool to see. It's just a rare thing. Before
there.
Yep. Yeah. Another good one. Yeah. But even like a goalkeeper like Michelle Betos, who wasn't in with the national team, those goalkeepers that weren't getting national team calls, well, yeah, a lot of them were retiring around 25, 27, 28, like they just weren't continuing to play. But you see someone who's continuing to play, even though there's not a national team call up on the line, I think that's a good sign, a good thing to see. As I said at the start, I could go, this talk could go for hours longer over all the million things. And so I'm gonna pivot a little bit to kind of wind down, but I'm trying to find a way to kind of cap all this together. So I guess I'm curious of looking where you are now, and looking back over the many years of, UNC was just a fraction of your time coaching. So looking at all the years, even outside UNC, I guess I'm curious on when you look at the federation's impact of where it was and what they were doing versus now, or when you look at even just like the countrywide efforts and landscape, what comes to mind when you look at 2026 versus, 20 to 30 years before, whether good or bad? I guess I'm just curious of having all these years reflect of where things were to where things are now. I'm trying not to lead you too much, because I am just very generally interested in your actual opinion, so I don't want to lead you. But looking at all these years, like what strikes you now of seeing where things were versus now?
I think there's so many more opportunities to play, which is usually a good thing. With the advanced players, the older players, the more established players, more experienced players, that's a great thing. I think where we're hurting is we're playing too many games early on at a young age. The player to the training to game ratio is out of whack. we need kids to be able to train until they're 15 or so, train more than you're playing. And for a lot of kids, it's not that way. I speak with a lot of veteran goalkeeper coaches, and one of the things that is a real common, Todd Hofford, who coached Real Salt Lake in the Nick Armando era for 13 years. He was at the Galaxy, he was at the Washington. He's saying that, when he's last summer, he went into he got called in to help with a couple different national league games, and he was just really disappointed in the technical abilities because they're playing so many games so early that they don't train. And again, we're getting at an age when they shouldn't be as outcome oriented. They are outcome oriented. We need to delay that. Just train, just practice. And then there comes a time, I'm not trying to be, warm and fuzzy. There comes a time when you got to win some games.
Yeah.
But if that occurs too early, you emphasis on winning games, but not developing.
Yeah.
So
can you detail a little bit more on not having enough training? How does that bite a goalkeeper on the back end?
Goalkeeping is a whole lot of technique dependent activities. You got to do this right because there's not a lot of margin for error. If I don't hold this ball, I'm giving up a rebound 2 yards in front of the line. And there was that big scramble. I forget what the game was just last weekend. Somebody didn't hold the ball. They just dropped it from, and boom, big scramble, it goes in.
Yeah.
And I think that we kind of aren't as, we're not as technically established with the younger goalkeepers. I see younger goalkeepers now, they'll go for every ball with two hands. And I understand, okay, in training, you want to try and train to catch everything. But you also have to learn that's a ball I'm not going to hold, and I can't get to with two hands. So I'm going to go, my unilateral reach is greater than my bilateral reach. My education's paying off. But you see kids going with two hands and they don't get there. And I'm going, well, you know what? If they went with one, they would get there.
Yeah.
So, and you learn that through a lot of training. When you do this a number of times and you're not getting it, you go, yeah, I get there now. And coaches will emphasize that. So it's difficult without that training to reinforce the technique. That's going to lead to problems.
Yeah.
We had sent, again, it's easy, just the Keller, Friedel, those guys going overseas, man, and wow, that's great. Now we send goalkeepers overseas. That's tremendous. But we haven't sent somebody with the same impact, Casey Keller or Brad Friedel, in a while. And I think, we have to really, really emphasize the technique at a younger age. I just was at the convention in Philadelphia, and I did a panel discussion on what is a college coach looking for in a youth goalkeeper. And one of the questions to follow up that was like, okay, so what should you train to have your goalkeeper impress college coaches? And Chris Stuttgart got up to the edge of the stage and just technique. They got to practice technique. And I think, again, having a lot of opportunities to play that's a great thing. But we're gaining more games, but losing more training. And I think there comes a point when that is a point of diminishing returns. Yeah. So we've got to be careful about playing so many games at the expense of losing training opportunities.
I always like hearing people say the same idea, but with different words and language. Makes me feel more confident. But I always talk about like a blueprint. Like you have to know like how and why you're doing something. Mm-hmm. And if you're just running around doing something and you haven't kind of weighed the pros and cons of what is or what you're doing or why you're not doing something, and you're just kind of throwing your body around, then you're not going to be able to know if something was good or not. You're just kind of running around. So the intentionality behind technique and having a plan, because even a technique for, a goalkeeper yourself versus Arnie Mauser, well, that would look different. You're not the same goalkeeper, but there's still a focus on, hey, this is my technique. I need to do this. And it's not because, well, coach told me to do something, I'm just robotically going to do it. It's like, no, hey, this is like my style, my technique. Now that I'll try.
There's plenty of that goes. YouTube is a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a curse. Because there's some good information on YouTube, and there's some incredibly bad information on YouTube, and it's put up there. And I mean, I understand. Okay, this coach had this idea, and they're trying to get kids to come and train with them. And so, you see videos. I don't know if you've seen the videos with like the inverse step. When if you're diving to the left, you step to the your left foot steps to the right. I mean, there's a friend, a goalkeeper coach I know that had that up, and he's got a lot of viewers. A lot of people watch his YouTube show, and I just contacted him and said, "Look, you got to squash that. That's just wrong. From as a goalkeeper, that's wrong. As a kinesiologist, that's wrong. As a biomechanist, that's wrong." But they put it up there because, like, I've got something new, so this is good. You should come and train with me. And I mean, I understand that they're trying to support themselves, but you know what? Tony supported himself because he had a good product.
Yeah.
Correct procedures, correct techniques. He trained them, and if you're changing the techniques just to gather customers, you're not serving soccer in the U.S. You're not helping us in terms of our development. So we've got to be careful with what we adopt.
Yeah, I always think about if you rise fast, like you can outpace your actual quality, because you might get some followers or you might get promoted or something, like things might just work out for you where you kind of hit the lottery. But at some point your quality is going to kick in, and that's where like you see a lot of flaring out, a lot of plateauing, where someone rose fast because something worked out for them, but they actually didn't have the quality, they didn't have a good product behind it. And as time goes on, cracks start forming, and it ends up showing eventually at some point.
That's the Peter principle. You familiar with that?
No.
Yeah, you rise to your point of failure. You do well at this job, you get promoted. You do this job, you do well at the job, you get promoted.
Yeah.
You suck. You can't do it. Well, you're up there. That's your job. So it's
yeah, buddy. Okay. There you go. Well, last two questions, and I think this will help kind of wrap up everything. But and you can go short or long about this, and really any direction. But when you look back to before, I'm going to put a line for you, before the '99 World Cup, we'll do that. What do you feel like gets forgotten about that era of goalkeeping? You go men's, women's game, you can go college, pro, youth, education, whatever. Like when you look back on that era, what do you wish was understood today more about that time? Because it's certainly on the women's side, the '99 World Cup is a huge point. But I feel like that whole 20, 30 years before that really kind of just gets washed out into like one or two things. So from that time period, and I'll let you go in any direction, but what is something you think, oh man, I wish this is something people understood better?
I like pressure. And I think that back then, because it wasn't as much, maybe we handled pressure better. I think things were a lot more fun there because there wasn't as much pressure. The pressure was internal versus external. In other words, we put a ton of pressure on ourselves. Our surroundings didn't as much, or if they did, we ignored them because we're putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think now, there's less enjoyment. And I don't know if it's because of an intrinsic is shifted to an extrinsic motivation within kids, within players. I just think that, again, it was, if you had to say, before '99 and after '99, because if you look at those '99ers, I don't know them as well as others, but I know some of them. I know them. If you ask about playing, they had fun.
Yeah.
And if you ask a national team player now, describe your experiences. Fun, when does the word fun appear?
Yeah.
With the 99s, if you said, what do you like about playing? Fun's probably going to be in one of the top 3 words that comes from everybody. And I don't know where fun comes in. Because again, I understand competition. I understand a high level of play. But it still has to have an aspect of fun to it. And that's what kind of sustains you. If it's a job and you're not good at it, you're going to find yourself a new job.
Yeah.
But if
what did it look like at UNC where you had a player that was competing, but it was fun for them versus a player that was competing, but wasn't having fun? Could you spot that out pretty quickly?
Yeah, they would end up leaving. Because again, if you talk, and I'll go back to the word fun, but if you ask players from that era in North Carolina, it's the competitive cauldron. And a lot of times people would ask, what's it like when they're measuring everything? And Carolina players would say, fun. Fun. Because I think they understood the purpose of that competition. They understood how it worked. They understood it worked. And then I think Anson and Dino, Bill Palladino, the assistant coach then, understood the value of fun. So they would be incredibly goofy at times and, comments here and there, stuff and the other things. Crazy stuff would go on, and there's all sorts of stories about that. But I think that kids have to remember that you need to keep having fun. You can play hard. You can play hard levels. You can play at a real good level, but it still has to be fun. It still has to be intrinsically motivating.
Yeah. Now, I often think about, I think we've all seen as coaches where a player stops enjoying it. And when you cross that threshold, I wouldn't say it's impossible to come back, but it's very, very difficult. When you hit a point where like this isn't fun anymore and you've spent all this time to get to that point, to then get back into it, you certainly can, but more often once you hit that point, it just seems like a lot of people are like, I'm done. Like I'm going to go, either I'm going to coast or I'm going to leave or I'm going to go do something else or, at least take some time off. Like if you lose that drive of excitement and fun, it's very, very, very difficult.
It can get, and again, I'll tell another story. I was at Ohio University. I coordinated the Masters in Coaching Education program there. We had two guys graduate, Marc-Andre Millet and Michael Supp, and after they graduated, they created a company called Beyond Pulse, which is a wearable technology firm. And they wanted to have kind of like a meetings of the minds, a soccer conference with a lot of soccer people to kind of decide on where's our company going to be, how's it going to go. So they brought in all these different soccer people. They had 2 guys, I think Mark Wilson from Manchester United was there, a couple guys from Atletico in Spain. And we had a really nice room at our university, with whiteboard walls so we could draw everywhere, stuff like that. We spent the day kind of going over, here's what the company should do, here's this, that, and the other thing about the company. And Lexi, I forgot her last name because she's gotten married now, but an Ohio University player, because I was helping the Ohio University team at the time, was a senior, and she was in an entrepreneur class, and she had to help out at this meeting as part of her coursework. And so there's a bunch of soccer guys talking all about this company and doing this, that, and the other thing. And so it's like 5 o'clock going okay, we're done. We'll play at 6. Okay. We're going to go to dinner time because of course we're going to play. Right. And so we go, Lex, come on, we're going to play at 6. She goes, you guys want me to play? Yeah, come on, play. So we went to Ohio has an indoor facility because we knew we could use that.
Yeah.
And show, okay, you're over there, you're over there, you're there, you're there, you're over there, you him, you're there, like you're there, do that, all that kind of thing. Right. And we just played. We played pickup for probably like an hour and a half. And afterward, I went to Lexi. Lexi, how was that? And her eyes were like saucers. She goes, that was so much fun. When you guys do that again? You go, well, look, we're going to do it tomorrow evening as well.
Yeah.
And she had just forgotten that because she was a a women's college soccer, a good college soccer player on scholarship.
Yeah.
But she had forgotten he was just playing pickup. She had
Yeah.
forgotten that. And so, when you mentioned once you cross the line, you can't go back, I think I might disagree. I think you just have to find that, I don't know, that kid in you again. And a lot of times that occurs when you play pickup. There's all sorts of data on Division I football players enjoy the game less than the Division III players. But the Division I players are on all kinds of money, all kinds of facilities, stuff like that. Division III players enjoy it more. And I think, we've got to remember to play pickup.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good point of being able to cut through to that like base foundation of like, hey, why are we, if you don't have a connection to like, hey, why I started this at age 5 or 10 or whatever it is, if you're not able to connect back to that and play very basic pickup things or something on that level, then like, yeah, you're probably having less fun just on average, and it's very difficult to kind of tap into that for a lot of people. So no, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, Bill, let's wrap up with this last question here. And another nebulous question and go any direction with it. But what does goalkeeping mean to you?
I'll tell people, the first thing I'll probably tell them is that, I've done a lot of athletics. I've been involved in a lot of basketball, a lot of tennis, also all kinds of stuff. I've done a lot of different kinds of running, stuff like that. But goalkeeping is the most challenging athletic activity I've ever been involved with. And I think that's why I think it's so cool. It was so much fun because it's the hardest thing. And again, the next person you talk to is going to have their hardest thing.
Yeah.
But for me, I really like that challenge. I mean, the goal is huge. They're kicking a ball at, 70 miles an hour. Okay, that's hard. And I like doing hard stuff. So I think that that's what goalkeeping means for me. I don't play in goal anymore because I don't want to spoil my memories. I have good memories of playing well in goal, and I'm not going to know. Man, I'm not touching those. If I do, I'm going to screw them up.
Yeah,
So I mean, I still play. I play every Thursday night with the Wingate girls team. But yeah, I don't go in goal.
Yeah.
That's special.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I aside from like the physical ailments like that may come with playing goalkeeper as we're out of our prime, I like being able to hold things as like a special, hey, like no one's touching that. That's what that is. So that's good. Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much. I love diving into this area and love kind of talking about these kind of either unknown or forgotten moments. We have so much like depth in our history with soccer, but a lot of it just gets boiled down to what's currently going on. So I always like kind of rewinding a little bit. So, and I know we just scratched the surface. We could have gone on for a very long time. So I appreciate the time. Thank you, Bill.
No problems. Enjoyed it, Bill.
Yeah, wonderful.